Now to some new attention for an old murder case. In 1999, Anthony Porter was released after spending 16 years on death row in an Illinois prison. Porter had been convicted in the 1982 murder of 2 teenagers in a Chicago park, but the conviction was reversed thanks to a reinvestigation of his case by Northwestern University's Innocence Project.
That led then Governor George Ryan to vacate the sentences of all Illinois death row inmates and sent another man to prison, All-Story Simon, who confessed to the killings. But according to a new documentary, A Murder in the Park, there is even more to this story.
After the conclusion of the grand jury proceedings, Anthony Porter's conviction was vacated. He was a free man. Through the Northwestern investigation, the guilty guy, All-Story Simon, was put in prison, and the innocent guy, Anthony Porter, was released. There was one problem, though. Anthony Porter killed those 2 people. It was one big lie.
Here to talk about the film is its co-director, Shawn Rech. Shawn, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
This is a case basically of double wrongful conviction, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. When I found out about this case, it was almost something that you'd find in a Hollywood script that would be implausible.
Take us through the case then. So what was the set of circumstances that landed him in jail, and when did you first start looking into it?
Well, it was a 1982 case. It was a double murder of Jerry Hillard and Marilyn Green, 2 teenage sweethearts in Chicago, the kind of thing that happens all the time, unfortunately. And it was a pretty open and shut routine case where Anthony Porter was found guilty, sentenced to death, and he was to be the first to die of lethal injection in Chicago. So you cut to 1998, there are advocates trying to save his life, and they get a stay of his execution because his IQ was measured at 51. So that gave a team of journalism students at Northwestern University some time to reinvestigate the case. So they set out to see if he really was the killer, and they developed information that said he wasn't, that someone else committed the crime, All-Story Simon. They found witnesses that implicated Simon, and they got someone they characterized as the only witness to change his testimony slightly, and that combination of events whipped Chicago up into a frenzy.
He confessed, though. Why do you think he confessed, Shawn?
Well, he thought his goose was cooked. They came in and showed him statements from his ex-wife and her nephew saying that he did it. They didn't say this for 15 years, but all of a sudden they were saying it. So he thought his goose was cooked. They also showed him tapes of people implicating him, or tape of a person implicating him who ended up being an actor who was scripted by the private investigator who interviewed him.
You spent close to 3 years researching this case, researching to make this documentary. What do you think the biggest mistake was?
Well, and there was a lot of research done before we did this too, by some federal investigators and a journalist named Bill Crawford. But how did this happen? Nobody paid attention to what was really going on. Had anybody pulled the original police reports from 1982, they would have seen that 6 people put Anthony Porter in the park or saw him commit the murder. Yet nobody brought that up when this was being re-reported in 1999. And even All-Story Simon didn't know that until 2 years after he was put in prison.
Right. Where are Mr. Porter and Mr. Simon now? What happens with this case?
Well, Mr. Porter still lives in Chicago. He's under the care of a community activist. And All-Story Simon lives in the Cleveland, Ohio area now, and he's starting to look into old cases of other people he left behind who he thinks were wrongfully convicted.
We reached out to Northwestern, and they decided to not comment. They declined, really, to comment on your documentary. Do you consider this sort of a takedown of the wrongful conviction movement, or just sort of good intentions that didn't play out?
It's good intentions gone awry, and there was some corner cutting and laziness. What it really comes down to is the journalists didn't conduct most of the investigation. They farmed it out to a private investigator. And he did his job masterfully. They told him what the goal was, and he went out and he made it happen. But he had no commitment to objectivity or fairness. He was just taking care of a client. And that's not the way investigations at this level are supposed to go down.
Shawn Rech, thank you so much for being with us. A
Thank
Murder
you.
in the Park is playing in select theaters and is available on video on demand now.